If you can, you should run, because running is good for you. It's what our bodies were evolved to do over all of this time, and you'll feel good for doing it. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, you should ride a bike. Riding a bike is actually the most efficient way to get around that we know of. It's the most efficient form of transportation. If you can't ride a bike, get on a bus, because busing is pretty much the most efficient form of public transportation that we've found. If you can't get on a bus, get on a train. If you can't get on a train, carpool and car share. The last thing you should do is get in a vehicle by yourself.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and my guests today are involved with hybrid electric vehicle research. I have two guys from the Team Fate Research Group at the Hybrid Electric Vehicle Center at UC Davis. Welcome, both of you, Patrick, Brian.
Thank you.
So, Patrick Kaufman, whose bachelor's is in mechanical engineering, is working on a master's in hybrid vehicle controls. That's got to be a pretty recent master's kind of theme, I would imagine.
Kind of. Self-defined, yes. But.
And Brian Jungers, whose background is in bachelor's is in environmental transportation engineering and in energy studies, energy systems, working on a master's in transportation technology and policy. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here. So tell us, what is this research center? What are you doing? Give us a little history.
Team Fate, the research group, started with Dr. Andrew Frank back in 1965. Dr. Frank has been working on vehicles all of his life, and he was kind of a hot rodder down in Pasadena. He had a professorship at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and there, with one of his first PhD student, they started the group Team Fate based on the old movie The Great Race, which came out that year. And if you remember Professor Fate from that movie, he's kind of this crazy guy who's driving these vehicles and actually kind of sabotaging the other people in the race. But he never gives up, and he keeps working towards his goal, and that's kind of like our Professor Fate.
So Professor Frank is Professor Fate, right?
Professor
He's been
Fate.
working at alternative vehicles?
Yeah, since about 65, he's working on flywheel vehicles, just advanced energy storage, larger battery systems. Didn't work on plug-in hybrids mostly until the 80s, but once he arrived at Davis, he's been working on plug-in hybrids pretty much ever since.
So that's a couple decades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, so we've had research going on. I didn't realize that far back. So what, how many folks are involved in the center? What kind of projects are you doing? Have you been doing them? That's a couple decades here.
We have a good mix of undergrads and grads. We have about 6 grad students, I would say. A few of them doing their research projects with the center, and some who are just involved. And then we have the rest just undergrads, who some come in every day and some come in once a week. So some of the projects we've done starting in the 90s, I think early 90s, the first plug-in electric vehicle hybrid was called Aftershock, and was a ground-up plug-in electric vehicle, just a sedan body type, small little vehicle, which got, I believe, about 73 miles to the gallon.
So it was a hybrid?
It was.
Okay, all righty.
And now, so there have been a couple of sedans, other projects that take about a couple years each, but in the late 90s, the interest shifted to trucks and SUVs, because that's where the market seems to be going,
Certainly.
according to the car manufacturers. And so in the last, we're currently working on an SUV, and we have 2 other SUVs already, plug-in hybrid electric SUVs already built that run.
And so it sounds like what you have to do to modify or to create one of these is different for each kind of body type. I mean, give us an idea of sort of what do you do to put together one of these vehicles?
Well, the vehicles that Patrick was just mentioning, the 2 sedans and the 3 SUVs, they're all conventional vehicles that were built by OEMs, these vehicle manufacturers, mostly General Motors and Ford. And we take those vehicles and we gut them, and we replace the powertrain. We lighten a lot of the materials. We try to make them a little more aerodynamic in some cases. So a lot of the vehicles on the road are not very aerodynamic. They're often very heavy. And so when we remove the engine that we replace it with is always smaller. The transmission that we replace them with is lighter in most cases. And so our vehicle is usually a little bit heavier because we put a lot of batteries on board, but it's not that much heavier. It's not as heavy as people would expect.
So you're lightening up all the other areas that you can in order to accommodate for more weight that the batteries are going to take.
Right.
So let's and later we'll take a tour of one of your vehicles. But give me an idea of what else, what kind of technologies. You replace the engine with another internal combustion engine, yes?
Much smaller.
One that's smaller, more efficient, and generally the emissions are better.
Yeah.
Cleaner.
Yes.
And batteries for the electric part of this.
And then electric motor. Now with the SUVs, we also add another electric motor because people want four-wheel drive. And so we drive the rear with another electric motor, not constantly, just for an traction assist.
So you've got an electric motor that generally runs your front wheels. Is that in a standard HEV? I know nothing, so you get to talk to us ignorant folks, right?
Sure.
So the basic design is, what we use is called a parallel hybrid design, which you have an electric motor and an engine that can both input on one shaft to a CVT, or a transmission.
What's a CVT?
A CVT is a continuously variable transmission, which allows us to change the gear ratio without discrete ratios. We can change the gear ratio in a range on the fly very smoothly.
So it allows input from both your electric motor
and
the internal combustion, whatever, how you ever get there.
Right. And then puts that to the front wheels.
And the way our system is set up, your electric motor is always directly coupled to the wheels. So you're
Through
always
the transmission.
Through the transmission. You're always going to be driving electrically some proportion, and the gas engine doesn't have to turn on necessarily, and so that's how we're able to drive electrically for some portion of the driving. All of our vehicles will drive between 40 and 60 miles all electric.
Okay.
And that's mostly to displace gasoline.
So, and for most people should be thinking about that, because for most people that's enough for the commute or the ride to town or to school or wherever they're going to go, which means that portion of their driving is at least zero emission.
Right. And according to the National Household Transportation Survey, or Travel Survey a few years ago, the average person drives 39 miles on the weekday and 41 miles on the weekend, and so we're going to meet most of those miles.
You're right there in the main needs. I want to go back to a question. Do I understand right that it's electric all the time? The electric motors are always working? And
pretty much.
Thus your gasoline engine is an assist or in addition to?
We have no clutch on our electric motor, so our electric motor is always going to be spinning as long as we're driving, as long as we're moving.
And we do regen with the electric motor too.
What's regen and what does it stand for?
So regen is regenerative braking, which allows us during braking, when the driver hits the brake pedal, instead of compressing the brake pads and converting all that energy into heat and wasting it, we use the electric motor, and through controls we recuperate some electrical energy and charge the batteries.
It goes back in and charges the batteries every time you brake. So you're using what would have been waste.
Right.
You're probably thinking about that all the time, aren't you? Sort of, what else can we use?
Efficiency is always on our mind. And cost of energy, any system we add, how much electricity or any kind of power is this going to take?
Right.
Yeah.
What's going to be the
and
trick?
weight, too.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be part of your efficiency equation, isn't
Exactly.
it? I mean, that's... So you're probably thinking what vehicle size is going to be some part of that as well. I mean, I would imagine the
Materials is more important than size.
Actually, I could get that. So what kind of materials are you using instead of whatever the standard body materials, for example, or?
Well, like Brian said, we take an OEM vehicle, so we have to use their unibody construction, and OEM vehicles are getting lighter with modern manufacturing. But anything like a cover, when we gut out, anything we replace, we try to use composites, carbon fiber or fiberglass.
Which are more expensive, but very, very lightweight and strong.
Right.
Right. So what kind of projects, so you're working on SUVs, you've done some sedans, you've got the front of your shirt says, future truck. So I want to know, is that one of the projects, or
it is
a dream,
this
or
is,
what?
I believe, the previous project to the one we're currently on. Brian is wearing a Challenge X shirt, which is the current project drive to sustainability.
Crossover to sustainable mobility.
Yes.
Now, what is that? I mean, tell me about each of these. Well, start with the truck.
He could talk more about Future Truck because I wasn't on the team.
Okay.
Future Truck was, at one point, it was sponsored by General Motors. They gave every team, there's anywhere between 15, 20 teams. I think we have 17 right now. Future Truck, they took a Suburban, which is sort of notoriously the anti-environmental vehicle, and had all these student teams rebuild it and try to make it better in terms of reducing its gas use, making it more efficient, and reducing the emissions. And so we took a Suburban that has something like 12 miles per gallon, combined fuel economy, and our vehicle actually has over 30 miles per gallon now, and also can drive for over 40 miles all electric. So some big benefits.
Way to go! Yes, you showed them how. So my question is back for a second. You mentioned a bunch of student teams. So my guess is there's a competition of some sort, or some. If it's not a competition, there's at least some sponsorship here.
It is a competition. That's what the Future Truck was, the name of the competition. Just like Challenge X is the name of the competition that Team Fate participates in.
Right, and historically, all of our vehicles have been built for some sort of national competition.
Okay,
which is what this
which
is.
I imagine you get some of your funding that way, and so on.
The Department of Energy and Argonne National Labs actually runs the competition.
So what's the Challenge X? What's a crossover to sustainable mobility?
It's pretty much the same as Future Truck with a new name, but I don't think there's really anything that they've added to the competition. It's 17 teams. There's one team from Canada, but the rest are all in the United States. It's all engineering programs, and just trying to think of new ways to improve vehicles and make them more efficient. None of the other teams are doing plug-in hybrids. We're the only one. Everyone else is doing standard hybrid, or there's one fuel cell vehicle that's being built.
Which actually kind of leads to an interesting question. Why? What are the advantages? Teach us about plug-in hybrids. What are the advantages here? What kind of things should people be thinking about? I mean, they're going to be thinking about what can we buy, and I realize you're doing the research end at the front end, but what are the advantages of the plug-in hybrids? And then we can talk about other vehicle technologies too.
Well, there's several advantages. The biggest advantage is, for a lot of people, I think, is the cost savings, because gasoline prices fluctuate quite a bit. Electricity prices tend to be more stable, and because our drivetrain is so efficient, you can charge at home and pay on the order of 70 cents per gallon equivalent for electricity, depending for the amount of driving that you're doing. And so you're saving money. Your emissions are reduced. Even in dirtier areas where electricity is from coal, they're showing that it's, at the very worst, it's the same as driving a regular car, but it's actually probably quite better. And so it depends on what your assumptions are.
So it's cleaner emissions, it's less costly, and I'm going to add, it's going to reduce the amount of gasoline, and thus our dependency on foreign oil, because I would imagine that peak oil is in the equation of your thoughts, at least, in designing these vehicles.
It's in a lot of thoughts of the researchers and the kids who come in.
Well, it's your future. You're looking at, you don't have the surplus that we did in my generation. Has that, are there other kinds of technologies that are coming along? And you mentioned fuel cells for one of the students. There's also biofuels. So how can you give us a sort of a comparison on these as possibilities for our vehicles?
Yeah, some of these technologies sort of work together, and some of them, in fact, they all can kind of work together if you would like to look at it more synergistically. I think they tend to compete with each other for funding, and that's where you have these issues. There's this pot of money, and whatever's politically favorable or whatever tends to get the money, and so you have people argue about that. Now, I think they should really just be putting more money in general into these advanced technologies, into energy savings, efficiency, and reducing our petroleum dependency, and just figure out what's going to work, because it does take that hurdle financially to get over. But we're using biofuels in our plug-in hybrids. So our vehicle right now will run on ethanol. So
straight ethanol?
It'll be
E85
because that's the competition. But technically we probably could.
We could run it on.
What does it take to modify your gasoline engine to run on ethanol?
Well, I did that. Actually, so we take, for our current car, for Challenge X, we call the car Trinity, and we run on actually a 2004 Prius engine. a combustion engine pulled out of a Prius, and it only takes mechanically, it takes a few seals and O-ring changes so that the ethanol doesn't eat it away. Very small cost there. The big change is a lot of controls. You need to change the amount of fuel that goes in, which you can do with just controlling the injectors. You need to change spark timing, and that's about it. Believe it or not.
That does not sound like.
Now,
go ahead.
Running on ethanol is a much more complex thing than just doing that, but it will run, and it will run clean. You have a lot of options. You can get more power out of it if you increase compression ratio and modify more and build an engine specifically for ethanol. But you can still run much cleaner than gas and run more efficiently than gas on, well, as efficiently as gas on this engine that we modified for the competition. So it can be done, and we're just showing that it can be done. And of course, the more research that goes into just running on ethanol, it can be done better.
Are any of the other competitions, or somebody working on an engine that's just for ethanol, so that it takes advantage of the the design that's really right for that fuel? Is that happening yet anywhere in America?
I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard
I would
that
be
either.
surprised if somebody isn't, but I haven't heard anything about it.
Why is that not on our radar? I mean, why isn't it up there on our radar, since we've got so many gasoline engines in our... And I realize retrofitting is one possibility, but...
Well, right now everyone's talking about running blended ethanol, so ethanol blended with gasoline, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think because that is what they're pushing for, E85 or whatever blend is preferable, that can run in a conventional engine, and why change the infrastructure if you don't have to, basically.
Well, it's certainly true.
I think infrastructure has a big thing to do with it, and because of that, it's where the funding, somebody has to fund the project to run. And so if people see that a flex fuel is more reasonable in the near future, that's where they're going to put their funding.
And how realistic do you think it would be for us to really convert our existing fleet? I realize we're making, new cars every 2.5 seconds or something? One other one rolls out. But for the existing cars, which are going to be on the road for a while, wouldn't a conversion to a flex fuel be... Is that easy to do?
Yeah, it's
if
pretty.
we were able to get the fuel,
easy.
I should say.
Yes, that's the concern.
Isn't
Once you've converted it, where do you get the fuel? How do you run it on?
Right. So right now our issue is that getting the E85.
Right, but the conversion itself is not too hard and doesn't cost a lot in materials. It costs in engineering time to figure out for each car how exactly you have to reprogram every car to change, the timing and the fuel amount. And
I can see a business opportunity going here. I mean, we've got smog people. I mean, we can certainly have ethanol conversion
and
services.
We're approached all the time, actually, by people who want us to convert their vehicle, and we'd love to. I would love to do that, but there's a lot of liability issues for us. I mean, we're just students, really, at a research center. So,
thinking about the whole expanse of other vehicle technologies, what about biodiesel? What about hydrogen? How do those and whatever else I haven't thought of? What else? How might those fit in to our futures?
Well, the way I see it, and I've seen this echoed by other researchers and Dr. Frank, our advisor, is that plug-in hybrids open the door quite a bit for other technologies like biofuels, because what they allow is for you to do most of your driving electrically. But when you need the range extension, you need to drive farther or you need to drive faster, you can use a combustion engine to burn biofuels, and you're using quite a bit less than you would if you were just to put those biofuels in a conventional vehicle and use it for all of your driving. And so by doing that, now your requirement, how much biofuel you need, is quite a bit less, something on the order of 10 to 20% of what you would otherwise need for your traveling. And so that's a very synergistic, potential future with biofuels and
which will require
hybrids.
less cropland, and if we add the efficiencies and people not driving when they don't need to, and so on. I mean, it could help settle some of that concern that some folks have about all of our cropland going to fuels instead of to food.
Right. And so I think the big issue is that people are pushing for zero electric vehicles, the people who are trying to push for this technology, and that is where we want to end up, because
zero emission.
Zero
Zero
emission.
emission. Yeah.
Right.
Not
Okay.
zero, yeah, zero
Right.
emission.
So that you don't have those on-road emissions, you don't have the urban air quality issues,
Right.
and all these other
Right.
things.
Global warming.
Right, and with the plug-in hybrids that we're working on, you're not using the combustion engine quite as much, but you're still using it, and so you still are going to be producing emissions, and so that's why hydrogen is attractive, and why people are doing a lot of research into hydrogen, because if you burn it, the only emission you have is NOx. You have no other emissions from combustion of hydrogen, and if you run it through a fuel cell, then you don't have any emissions except water. Which you have during combustion as well. But the only problem with hydrogen, well, there's several technical hurdles that they have not been able to get over yet, and storing hydrogen is very difficult in any amount that is actually useful to get the range that you want. And it's such a light gas; it just wants to expand.
Escape.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got some safety issues, right?
There are
around
safety
that.
There's some other issues. Creating hydrogen is another big one. And
Why is that a hurdle? What's the hurdle in creating hydrogen?
it's energy intensive.
Okay, so it takes a lot of energy to create the hydrogen
Right.
gas in the first place, which in this time is mostly using natural gas.
I'm not sure
Fossil
what the
fuels. Is that right?
most
Yeah,
common is.
most hydrogen is made from natural gas right now, and so hydrogen is the most abundant substance in the universe, but it doesn't exist in our planet. It does not exist by itself. So you have to get it from somewhere, and usually you have to split it. Natural gas is methane. You split it from that carbon, and you have some hydrogen. You can also, the clean way to do it is to use renewable energy, an electrolyzer, which splits the water molecule, the hydrogen and oxygen. Usually people vent the oxygen and store the hydrogen, and it's a pretty neat system. It works well, but it's not that efficient. It's about 75% efficient to do that. Then you have to clean the gas, you have to compress the gas, you have to store the gas, you have to transport the gas, you have to put it in the vehicle, then the fuel cell is only so efficient. So there's all these losses all the way along. So it seems like it makes a little more sense to use the renewable energy directly, put it in a battery.
Rather than with all these extra
or
losses.
some other way to efficiently store it and then use it directly. And there are some cases where hydrogen does seem to make sense, where you can't get batteries, you've got stranded resources for renewable energy. A lot of wind systems, hydrogen seems to make a lot of sense, because wind tends to be, you have co-location issues, because the wind is here and the people live here, and because people don't like to live where it's windy generally.
Yes, right.
And so if you've got all this wind here, you don't have transmission lines that are big enough to get all of the resources there, because they're really, really expensive. You might be able to make on-site hydrogen and truck it or pipe it, and it could be quite a bit cheaper.
It sounds like, though, we shouldn't hold our breath waiting for the hydrogen vehicles in the next 5-10 years. There's more research to be done to see if...
There definitely is.
And in the fuel cells, that was one other part. There's expensive. They're very expensive because of the materials involved. And they need to be further developed so that they can be useful on a car. They may not be too bad at power stations and whatnot, but to put something in a car, it requires a different standard and a few more considerations.
Yeah, no, Honda is actually coming out with a fuel cell vehicle commercially in 2009. That's what they've announced.
Oh, interesting.
And
So we'll see.
We'll see how it turns out. They've definitely figured out a lot of problems that other companies, I think, have not figured out in terms of balancing the plant and maintaining temperature. They're claiming that they can sit their car in sub-zero weather for a couple of days, and you can get in it and start right up, which is something with fuel cells you haven't been able to do, because it requires you to basically put water on your fuel cell, and if it's freezing temperatures, you're going to freeze your fuel cell and it's not going to run.
Right. In our last 3 minutes here, I want to ask about batteries.
Okay.
Back to your hybrid, where are we? Are we still with the lead-acid batteries like we have in most of our cars, or where is that going?
No, we're definitely beyond lead acid. Nickel metal hydride has been the promising technology for many years. It's what went into the second generation of EV1s. It's what went into
Electric vehicle ones, right, in the
yeah.
90s?
The General Motors electric vehicle.
vehicle.
It's the only purpose-built electric vehicle that's been made in the last 100 years or so. The nickel metal hydride batteries work very well. They're very non-toxic in terms of recycling. They're 100% recyclable, but they're relatively heavy compared to the newer technology with this, which is lithium ion.
Lithium ion, like we have in our computers
Right.
and so on.
Right.
Lithium ion, yes. Laptop batteries.
Laptops, right.
Right. Lithium ion it's lighter, the power density is higher, and it makes a lot of sense for vehicle applications because you can package it and you don't have those weight increases that you do with other better technologies. The only problem is right now we're not entirely sure that they're going to last as long as the nickel metal hydride, and the recycling at the end of life has not been figured out yet. They're toxic, and you need to be able, if everyone's going to be driving one of these, you need to be able to recycle them.
Absolutely.
And there's a safety concern if you heard about the laptop batteries that have been overheating and cause burning, but those are older generation lithium ions. The newer generation lithium ions have fixed that problem. So people shouldn't be scared of lithium ions in the future.
It sounds like we're still working some of the bugs out,
Right.
if you will. To make it scalable, I would imagine, is also the issue. They're still fairly, they're fairly expensive, is that right?
They are.
Still. They're the new
They
kid
still
on
are
the
pretty
block.
expensive, yeah.
All new technology is fairly
Of course.
expensive, and the price goes down
course,
as you
as we
mass
use
produce
it.
Yeah.
And what are you using on your vehicle? What kind of batteries?
All of our previous vehicles have had nickel metal hydride made by Ovonics company. We're using lithium ion for our newest vehicle made by a company called Gaia in Germany.
So this will be a chance for you to do some finding how that works and so on.
We're going to get to compare, and we're trying to do some tests on some of the cells right now.
Excellent.
And they perform really, really well. But whether or not they last, and what we do with them when they're dead, we'll see.
Well, yeah, obviously, how long they last, we all have to wait to see how they do, depending on how much demand and usage and all the other factors that affect them, temperatures. I don't know what all affects a battery.
Right.
But I can certainly see that having to determine what you do with recycling those materials is an important. I'm glad to have you thinking about the whole life cycle from cradle to grave on a vehicle.
There's actually a similar issue with carbon fiber. Recycling that has not completely been figured out yet. And so, like these light materials, they're great, they're sturdy, they're durable, but we need to be able to recycle them because right now they can recycle about 99% of your vehicle, or 98%.
That's right.
And so the plastics, the steel, it's all being recycled. So no matter how dirty vehicles are, they're actually doing pretty good at resource recovery.
That's great. Thank you. This has been illuminating. I'm looking forward to trying a plug-in hybrid, and we'll take a look at yours in part 2 of our Peak Moment shows with you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Thanks for joining me.